Hello, I'm Sarah Hardy and I'm the director of the De Morgan Foundation. And today I'm going to give you a talk on behind the scenes. So just how we managed to transport 77 De Morgan artworks from various locations across the UK to Delaware Art Museum for the fabulous new exhibition, A Marriage of Arts and Crafts, Evelyn and William De Morgan. I'm really pleased that you can join me today. I know a number of you on the call, but I know we've got some new people watching today as well. So hello and very welcome to the De Morgan Foundation. For absolute clarity, I'm no longer in Delaware. I arrived back on Monday morning. So I'm talking to you from the UK. I just thought that might help as I'm talking about this retrospectively, and I'll go into the work that we did to put this exhibition together. And that will include how the idea came about, so the planning and curation, which started about 6 years ago. So it's been a real piece of work to get this exhibition up and running through various, issues like global pandemics and that sort of thing. And then tell you a little bit about the De Morgan collection and where that is in the UK. And then we'll talk about the fun stuff, the stuff I think you're all here to learn, which is at Crown Fine Art, which is our warehouse where we store the artworks, and how we go about packing, transporting, and installing so many artworks into an exhibition in the US. I'll then tell you a little bit about how we actually physically install the artworks in the exhibition and the wonderful mount making we had done specifically for this show. And then I'm going to take you on a bit of a digital tour of the exhibition. So why Delaware? I think that's the first big question on everyone's mind. So those of you who know Delaware Art Museum, you will be one step ahead of everybody else. The reason for being Delaware is the wonderful Samuel Bancroft collection, and you're looking at an image of Samuel Bancroft here on the right-hand side. By 1861, he had basically set up he'd inherited a textile mill empire in Delaware. He was born in Delaware in 1840 to Quaker parents, and through various links that he had internationally, he became very well known to Charles Fairfax Murray, who was an artist and also a link really for Bancroft to the Pre-Raphaelites. And he just absolutely adored Pre-Raphaelite painting and went on to put together the largest and most comprehensive really collection of Pre-Raphaelite artwork outside of the UK. It's absolutely a stunning collection and includes highlights such as Ford Madox Brown's Romeo and Juliet, a painting made by Brown sort of after the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood had been established and developed in the late 1860s and up to 1870. It's a fantastic and quite enormous picture, which shows this high dramatized moment of Romeo leaping over that balcony into Juliet's outstretched arms. The dynamism in the piece is obvious, especially with this wonderful outstretched arm of the figure of Romeo, which leads us to think that the idea behind this is probably the stage production that Madox Brown is envisaging, rather than trying to reimagine the traditional scene. So a really fantastic picture in Delaware's collection. There's also one of the Briar Rose series by Edward Burne-Jones, made in 1872. And this one is the council chamber. So we have there the members of the chamber completely fast asleep as this wonderful Briar Rose creeps all around them, enveloping in them during their 100-year slumber, waiting for the reawakening of Sleeping Beauty, of course, and that fantastic fairy tale. The collection is an astonishing one of paintings by Dante Gabriel Rossetti. I think there are 4 sort of huge masterpieces by him, and a number of other sketches, studies, and a huge amount of correspondence between Rossetti and Fanny Cornforth as well, one of his models and one-time housekeeper and lover, of course, as well, with it being Rossetti. So here we have the wonderful Lady Lilith. From Rossetti's more aesthetic period, where he was interested in the beauty of the painting above any of the messaging in it. And then obviously it's the combing of the hair that is the real star of the show in this picture, showing off the incredible beauty of his model, Alexa Wilding. And excuse the poor reproduction, it's taken from a snap I took last week that isn't a particularly good one. But Delaware Art Museum also do have a fantastic collection of Victorian decorative arts, including, of course, the piece by the arts and crafts ceramicist William De Morgan. Now, in order to spotlight these De Morgan pieces, there are some lovely tiles as well in Delaware's collection. The previous curator of the Bancroft collection, someone called Margaretta Frederick, got in touch with the De Morgan Foundation, like I said, about 6 years ago, just as I'd taken over the position of director at De Morgan, and started this discussion about possibly wanting to mount a show in Delaware, which would allow visitors who already knew the Bancroft collection and visitors in the States more widely to be able to have a full retrospective of artworks by this artist, and of course by his wife, Evelyn De Morgan. And really from those very early conversations, mine and Margaretta's wish for this exhibition was that it would be one that would celebrate the De Morgans as a working couple, as working partners. And again, sort of one of the reasons behind this was to spotlight the work of Evelyn De Morgan and really start to celebrate some of the female Pre-Raphaelites. Delaware's collection contains some wonderful watercolors by an artist called Barbara Beaudeschon, who is, again, one of these female artists from the period who isn't as well known as she should be, and they do a lot to celebrate her artwork. And this is where we start to see really interesting links between the two collections, as Barbara Beaudeschon was, in 1873, William De Morgan's landlord for a short time. So it's been a fantastic opportunity to put this exhibition together, and for both parties, I think, to look at these links between some of the artists and some of the more biographical details, as well as their splendid artworks, of course. So we very early on in the exhibition planning had to put together an object list, and we came up with 77 artworks that would be transported to Delaware for the exhibition. And I was very mindful that it should be some of the best pieces in the De Morgan collection for, like I said, this first major retrospective of their artwork outside of the UK. So the Parrot Tile Panel by William De Morgan was one of the sort of the key works, the first works that we chose for the exhibition. This is a section of it where you can see something I think is really interesting about De Morgan's practice, in that when he was making these enormous tile panels, he wouldn't paint directly onto the tiles, and he wouldn't make the tiles individually. He would actually put together a huge panel of the tiles already all stuck together and laid out, and then he or his staff would paint the designs onto a thin tracing paper and stick that onto the front of this whole panel. And if the paper was folded or if it jutted together, the glaze would actually create this line. So the fault line you can see just where my cursor is actually not just on the reproduction, that's actually on the tile panel itself, and it's visible. And I think it just really gets to the heart of De Morgan's handmade practice, that you can see these imperfections on the ceramics. So this gives you an idea about the title that we eventually came up with, A Marriage of Art and Craft, not just to show off the two artists' work individually, but to show them together. And secondly, to look at the art not just as something beautiful, but really get behind the process of these two artists. Flora, of course, really is a spectacular painting by Evelyn De Morgan from 1894, one of the finest in the collection and one of the finest that this artist ever made. So that was an absolute search for us, really, in selecting the pieces to go to Delaware. And this sort of brings me on to another thing that we'll sort of come on to, or a practical element of putting the show together. The quality of this painting was such when the artist made it that it has needed very little conservation and is in particularly good quality. We're not worried about anything to do with the paint surface or the technical construction of this as a work of art. And so this does make it a good candidate for international travel, because we have very little to worry about in terms of the kind of the physical impact on the artwork that art transport can sometimes take. So making sure that all 77 artworks were fit to travel from a conservation perspective is also something that guided our curatorial choices in which artworks would end up in the show. So why did it take such a long time to put this show together? Exhibitions can take this long. That's fairly normal, really. There were some things that that got in the way, and I've already mentioned coronavirus, of course, did change our thinking on the show, and of course had a bit of an impact on when we were able to mount it. But the other thing was something that Margaretta absolutely drove, and was her idea from the off, is that this is such a special occasion for the artworks to be going to America, and it really did need to be celebrated more than just with an exhibition catalogue. So usually when you go to see an exhibition, you'll be able to buy a book or a guide, which has a list of all of the artworks in that exhibition and some information about them. It's pretty straightforward. I'm sure lots of people in this talk today, or people watching, understand that concept. But we wanted to do something a little bit different. It's a long time since anything was published at all on either Evelyn or William de Morgan. In fact, the last major publication of anything by either of them was in 1996, when the catalogue Resonate of Evelyn de Morgan's paintings was published, so a very long time. And whilst there have been articles published in academic circles more recently than that, we were very mindful that this exhibition demanded a little bit more. And along with myself and Margaretta, some fantastic scholars, academics and museum curators very kindly contributed essays of 8,000 words each with full colour illustrations to be published by Yale University Press, which we were particularly proud of, the accompanying publication. So it's a bit more than an exhibition catalogue. You see a range of artworks that are in the De Morgan Foundation's collection, in other collections, and it really explores facets of the De Morgan's artworks which we weren't able to fully explore within the confines of the exhibition. So Judy Oberhausen and Nick Peters provided a piece on Evelyn de Morgan's friendships, people that she knew. Jan Marsh's fantastic chapter is on Evelyn de Morgan's Italian phase, so when she first travelled to Italy, and that does make up quite an important part of the exhibition. Diana Maltz talks about William de Morgan's publications, so the novels that he wrote later in his career. Alistair Carew-Cox and William Waters present a chapter on de Morgan's stained glass practice. My chapter's on William de Morgan as an inventor, so we're looking beyond his artwork to some of the other occupations in his life to see ultimately what drove him to the ceramic production. Oliver Watson provided a chapter on de Morgan's links with Persian art and his understanding of what that meant, how he reproduced them in his own pieces. Sally Woodcock's chapter is on the arts colourman, someone called Charles Roberson, who sold art materials to William and Evelyn de Morgan. So we can understand, like I said, a bit more about how they created their artworks. Christopher Jordan's piece is on William de Morgan's patrons, people who were buying his artworks. Emma Merkling's fantastic chapter is a look at the symbolism Evelyn de Morgan was using and how we can understand from that her wider interest in subjects that you might not think of, such as science and mathematics. Richenda Roberts provides a chapter on Evelyn de Morgan and the First World War, whilst Luciella Rose discusses the feminism of the artists and their interest in the suffrage movement. So like I said, there's a lot in that book that is picks up on some of the themes in the exhibition, but really does expand upon those. That's available to purchase now on the Yale University Press website, and at $50, about £40, I think, it really is, I think, if you like the De Morgans, absolutely well worth it. Somewhere between an academic book and a coffee table book. So how do we do this practically? We've got the book, we've got the idea, we've got a list of artworks. How on earth are they then taken from the De Morgan collection in the UK to America? Well, I think for those of you who don't know, it's first of all worth pointing out that the De Morgan collection is just that. It's a selection and a group of artworks by the De Morgans. It's not a museum in the traditional sense. We don't have bricks and mortar where everything is in one location. And you can see in the map here on the right-hand side of the screen, the locations that we are based in, and the list on the left, which is Cannon Hall in Barnsley, the Watts Gallery in Surrey, Whittick Manor in Wolverhampton, and the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. And those are highlighted on the map on the right-hand side. So at least sort of 200 miles between each site there. It was no mean feat. This required me travelling to all of our various locations to get individual artworks, take those down from the display they were currently in and replace them with something else from the collection. The collection is stored in London. So it really did take an enormous amount of work and time. I was on the road for about 6 weeks, going to the various De Morgan locations and making these swaps in the artwork so that I could combine everything that we needed for the Delaware show in London prior to our packing. In order to do this, we did something called soft wrapping the artworks. When things are only being transported by road on a fine art transport vehicle, so a truck with various different technical features to it, which enable the really good suspension, for example, that stop the artworks moving around too much, we can soft wrap them. And this is an example of some soft wrapped paintings. Some of you will notice Helen of Troy and Cassandra now in the Delaware Museum exhibition. So here around the side of the frame, we have acid-free tissue paper. It's very delicate material and it stops abrasion from what is a cotton strap which goes across the front of the picture before the whole thing is wrapped in polythene. So the reasons for doing this are that the cotton tissue protects the frame from the cotton tie, sorry, the conservation tissue protects the gilding on the frame. The cotton tie is there because the pictures don't have any glazing. So it's the bare sort of painted canvas could be damaged by abrasion from the polythene. So by putting the cotton ties there, the polythene can't touch the painted surface. And then everything's wrapped up together, and then we put a full tape seal along all of the edges, which in, you know, the absolute worst case scenario would make the whole thing be absolutely waterproof. It can also retain the same humidity as the room it was packed in for up to 8 hours, which is incredibly important with fine art, particularly paintings and wooden objects, anything that can absorb moisture, because that can change the values or the nature of the artwork, and this can in extreme circumstances can cause damage to the artwork. So there we go, that's how we sort of get these artworks wrapped up, and there's a few of the pieces stacked up at Cannon Hall when I went up there as long ago as August, I think it was, to pack up these artworks. Everything's then put onto the back of a truck, as I described. So we have our soft wrapped artwork there, a different picture in this case that I had a video of. This is a video of Queen Eleanor going on the back of the truck. And you can see that what the technicians have done is stack the painting onto some foam blocks. These provide, it's almost like a shock absorber. So any vibrations coming from the truck moving or the driving of the truck will then be absorbed by those foam blocks and not be taken up by the painting. The top of the painting's been wrapped in a soft blanket to protect the artwork as the straps go around it, and it's strapped onto the side of the vehicle, again to stop any movements or vibrations with the picture. So it's a very safe way of transporting them to these minimum requirements we work to in museums. You can also see in the back of this truck, particularly, we had an artwork that had to travel flat, and so that's been strapped into the side of the truck, but around the wooden crate in this instance that artwork's being transported in. So that's how they go into the back of a truck. We then took everything to Crown Fine Art. There are many companies that deal with the shipment of fine art. We work with a company called Crown. I think they're marvellous, so definitely worth a mention on this video. And at the warehouse, we have all of our De Morgan artworks stored. Things that were at Crown already were stored in these wooden crates, so everything had to be unpacked and put into new crates so that everything could be shipped to America together. So that's just a little view of the inside of the warehouse. We then do something called condition reporting. So it's in everyone's interests that undertaking a show like this not only brings the artworks to new audiences, but we're very mindful that anything that we ever do with the collection, when we're displaying it or moving it or photographing it, doesn't alter that piece in any way. So it's all about preservation. So we're not interested in, when we're doing a condition report, we're not interested in everything being pristine. These are objects over 100 years old, they've got nicks, chips, bumps in them. What we do at the condition reporting stage is take lots of photographs of an artwork, everything from a plate to a tile to a painting, and then we write a full report for each artwork that says exactly what condition it's in, any areas that we need to be particularly careful of when handling, the materials, how the artwork is constructed, how it should be handled, so that anyone who comes in contact with that artwork, even be it a small William de Morgan tile, they'll have full instructions about how that piece is made. So this is particularly important for things like paintings. If the frame was loose on one side, you'd make sure that people knew to carry it top and bottom. Never pick a jug up by its handles, for example, as they could be a weak area. But it also means when we arrived in Delaware, and I repeated this process of condition checking, if there was anything that I thought might have changed during the journey, it could be addressed immediately by a conservator. So if we've been worried about some flaking glaze or paint on one of the artworks, we would have an exact record of what it looked like when it set off, and we could think, oh, actually, it hasn't changed. It's not an area for concern, but we'll keep an eye on it throughout the exhibition and through any further movements. And here, hopefully this will work. Is a video showing me doing my condition checking. So we have the William de Morgan ceramic plate there wrapped in acid-free tissue. So I've got that out of the container at the warehouse it was in. And this is the full report. So you can see that's full of images. It's got other people's comments on it, and it gives all the information about the construction of the artwork. So I have a read of that report. And then I'm able to compare the piece in front of me to the pictures that were taken before it set off from the last location, and then sign off on that report to say that everything is exactly the same. So that's how we ensure that these objects are preserved physically when they're undergoing any transport. So once I had brought everything back to Crown, unpacked it from the packaging it went into the De Morgan locations across the country, and then re-wrapped it into its soft wrapping, it was time to pack the pieces into their crates. So you can already start to see the huge undertaking that this is for the 77 objects, but thankfully I'm supported by an incredible team of technicians at Crown Fine Art and at the other museums. So the paintings we've seen how they're soft wrapped, and then you saw them there stacked against the wall, ready to go into their big wooden crates for transport. But packing the ceramics is a bit more interesting. So here's John, who I worked with at Crown Fine Art, and he's making his way through this stack of foam in order to cut shapes that exactly fit around this William de Morgan vase. So the foam will have a hollow through the middle and then be stacked around the three-dimensional vase in order that when it is transported, the whole thing is in its own foamy bubble, and that absolutely protects it from any impact, any drops that it may have, and it really is quite a very safe way of transporting artworks. But the work that John particularly put into this project when he was working with me was incredible, and it was like watching an artist at work, really, having all this foam cut and these bespoke made crates for the journey to America. So you can see here what that looks like inside. Once all the foam has been cut out, it sits comfortably around the whole surface of this vase. That then goes into a stack. The whole stack goes into a cardboard carton, and the cardboard carton goes into a foam-lined wooden crate. So I can assure you that it's a very safe way of packing up the artworks and taking them. So here's a look at the final crates, absolutely beautifully made. These wooden crates, obviously to protect from the elements and to protect from any impact that the artworks might have. And we tape them all up with fragile tape and the direction that they should travel in. And that's very much done based on the orientation of the original artworks, but also the size and height of a piece. So Flora, for those of you who know, for example, is very, I call it an upturned letterbox orientation. It makes it very top heavy crate, and actually an oil painting is perfectly safe to travel on its side. So for transport to the US, we would reorientate that crate so that that painting was traveling on its side to make sure that it was safer to handle, really. All these crates then loaded at Crown onto a truck, and next picture is, and then we go to the airport. So I arrived at Crown Fine Art on the Tuesday morning that we were heading to the US, just after midnight, collected all the crates, signed them all off. You saw on the crates, everything has a sticker with a serial number and a number of the crates. So I ensure that I'm keeping a list of all of those to make sure we've got all 16 in this case crates, and that everything is being loaded together. At the airport, I'm very fortunate that I can go into the cargo shed and I can oversee the movement of crates on forklift trucks onto something called a pallet, which is what is loaded onto the plane. Now you can see here I've written 160 is the magic number. In order for the pallets to fit onto the plane in the hold underneath where you sit as a passenger, 160 centimeters is the highest we can have the crates. So that also comes into play when we're deciding which way round we're sending objects. And so this is a pallet. It's the metal piece just underneath the crates that you can see where I'm pointing the cursor. So the crates are all stacked onto this pallet. It's like a giant game of Jenga, but nothing's ever stacked on top of one another. We make sure that doesn't happen, just to avoid any movement in that top box. Everything's then strapped down with these enormous great cords, ratchet straps, really heavy duty pieces of equipment that keep those crates on that metal base. And then the metal base here, you can see that it's on a roller bed, and that is lifted by this forklift type, excuse me, piece of equipment, which takes it, as I said, into the hold of the plane. So I'm assuming people have either been on a plane or seen a plane. This is where you would sit next to one of these windows, and underneath you, next time you're on one, anything could be down there. This is how all air freight is shipped, and it really is potluck what's going to be on your plane with you. So you might have these incredibly valuable cultural objects, or you might have crates of tomatoes. It's my job at the airport to make sure that it is only De Morgan paintings that get stacked on that single pallet. So someone did arrive with a great big delivery of cabbages when I was standing in the cargo shed, and between me and the rep from Crown, he said, you know, absolutely not. There's no way that this vegetable matter is coming in contact with valuable artworks on the shipment. So it's just De Morgan artworks, and we took up 2 full pallets. These then get slotted onto the plane and moved down to the back of it, and each one has a serial number, which I take, and it has an allocation number on the plane, so that when we land at the destination, I have already sent ahead that information to the airport rep in the US in this instance, and he knows exactly which pallets to look for coming off the plane, so that he can make sure that nothing interferes with them from the moment I saw them on to the moment that they come off, and he's the first person to greet those at the airport. The reverse then happens. Me and all these crates go onto a truck, and we drove from, in this instance, Philadelphia Airport to the Delaware Art Museum. And this is the crate that contains the soft wrapped flora. So you can see what a big crate that very impressive, very large painting ended up in. What we then have to do is get everything unpacked so that it can be installed. And with such huge crates as this, the first thing to do is to lay them down flat so that that lid can be lifted off and the painting can be safely removed from the crate. And then it's to the installation. This team, the staff, will take the painting out of the crate, lay it down on the table here for me to have a look at, and I get my trusty condition reports out, and I'm able to condition report the whole painting and just check every square inch of that picture to make sure it's exactly as it was in the report and the photographs when we set off. So like I said, a very time-consuming process when you've got 77 to do, and some of them are as big as this painting, but every inch of the front, back and frame is checked to make sure it is exactly as it was when we set off. And then the installation process starts. So it's quite hair-raising stuff with something as important as flora. You can see we work with for this picture, 4 technicians at once. in order that one person, here he is, there's Andy moving the ladders around the painting so that he can fix the high security clips onto the back of the frame, which attach it to the wall, whilst the other 3 technicians keep hold of that picture. So obviously the wall has been measured out and the holes and the fixings have been drilled into the wall before we start that. You can see that the museum white glove is a thing of mystery. We never really use the white gloves, and that's because they're generally made of cotton. They can be quite abrasive on the surface, which for a delicate, intricate gold frame like Flora is absolutely no good. And for the ceramics, it can make your hands very slippy, which is a drop risk. So we use these gloves, which are nitrile gloves, the same ones that people use in hospitals today due to latex allergies being so common. So we tend to use these nitrile purple gloves, which prevent any residue from people's hands, any natural oils in the skin being transferred onto the surface of the painting there. And so there she is. It was a great moment for me when that picture went up after sort of 6 years thinking about it being on that wall. To eventually get it there was quite something. It's not just the paintings that we have to install. When you go to an exhibition, you expect to know what the pictures are. And so we have the text, which is transferred as each individual letter that you can see there from a vinyl cutout onto the wall. So there's Andy doing a fantastic job of installing that. And something that's been really special to this exhibition is the mount making that we undertook. So here's Will, a wonderful museum mount maker, and the mounts I'm talking about were these sort of 3-legged stands that held the plates. They're like works of art in their own right, which you can see with the painted backs of them to match the decoration of the plate, so that as a visitor, when you come to the exhibition, the mount isn't there. It's the plate that you can fully appreciate. However, I think that the mounts should be appreciated by everybody. And so it's my pleasure now to introduce you by the medium of video to Meg Thomas, who's the Assistant Registrar at Delaware Art Museum, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about making these mounts and making sure they're safe to hold the ceramic plate.
I am Meg Thomas. I'm the Associate Registrar here at the Delaware Art Museum. And what I'm doing here is padding the mounts for our portion of the trip for the De Morgan Collections show of, essentially this is for a plate. So what this is made of is this is all brass. I have to put in a disclaimer, I didn't do all of this work. All this work was done so beautifully by Will Booker, who's very shy. But essentially, these are painted brass and bent to fit each plate custom. And what I'm doing here now is essentially laying down this polyethylene, suede polyethylene sheets. And this is also, it doesn't scratch the plates. It's very important. So I'll let you guys watch my process here. So the important part is to get this polyethylene all the way up underneath this tiny, I don't know if you get that, tiny little lip there.
So there we can see the effort, the craftsmanship, really in a De Morgan type style, with everything being absolutely handmade and custom built to carry each plate in the exhibition, and they just look fantastic in the show.
I am.
So with all that in mind and all that hard work, whether that's from the ideas behind each piece, the selection of the location in the first place, or how the artworks were taken to and displayed in Delaware, what we have, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to announce, is an exhibition which is incredibly beautiful and very informative. So I'd like to now, if you'll allow me, take you on a journey through the exhibition and talk about some of the key themes and show you some of the pictures of the finished article. So here we have Delaware Art Museum. From the front, so the exhibition space is just in through the doors here and all the way around to this side of the building. Absolutely beautiful museum. When you first enter the space, you're welcomed by the beautiful vinyl lettering, which explains to this new audience who William and Evelyn de Morgan are. We describe them as a creative power couple, as both were well established when they first met and started working together, even though that was in different fields. But we really wanted to discuss how they were very shared, very well aligned in their ideals, and how they supported one another's career. So that's, you know, this marriage of them coming together and helping the other one really to be the best they could be in their artwork and in their careers. And we've also had these, you know, the opportunity to put these wonderful, great big pictures of the two artists in there, because it's always nice to have a face for a name, isn't it? So this is the first view of the exhibition that you might enjoy, and instantly you get to see Evelyn's paintings and William's ceramics together. So before you even get any biography about the artists, apart from that very brief introduction, their artwork is shown in parallel. Flora, of course, steals the show. There's nothing I could have done about that. It's just such an impressive painting. And that is next to this giant luster dish by William de Morgan. Both of them have Renaissance Italian influences. So Flora, of course, based on the artwork of Sandro Botticelli, whilst the plate on display here is very similar to some of the artwork you see on 16th century Gubbio and Deruta ware, especially that deep bowl of that plate and the wide rim. So it was wonderful to be able to kind of aesthetically and sort of with the shared ideologies behind the artworks kind of talk about that, but also just to think about how the De Morgans might have displayed the artworks themselves in their own home. So that's, I hope, a very impactful first look at the exhibition. You're then taken around the corner to a space where we are able to display the Grey Sisters, a very early painting by Evelyn de Morgan based on a work of literature, Goethe's Faust. So it shows some of her wide-ranging influences. And directly next to that, we have three dishes by William de Morgan from the three distinct periods of his ceramic production. So from the Chelsea period, very difficult to see, I know here, through to the Merton Abbey period with the second lustre dish, and the third one from the Fulham period. But I think having three very similar pieces from very different time periods next to each other shows that actually De Morgan's style didn't really develop too much across his 30-year career, which is kind of what I wanted to get at. Whereas with De Morgan's paintings, you do see very distinct differences with these two pictures having been painted 10 years apart. You're then sort of invited to move around the corner, and the text on the wall next to this picture talks about feminism. The De Morgans, both absolute supporters of women's suffrage, William becoming the vice president for the Men's League of Women's Suffrage by 1914. But as early as 1889, Evelyn de Morgan had signed the declaration in favour of women's suffrage. So it's brilliant with a picture like The Gilded Cage by Evelyn de Morgan to discuss that. Here we can see a not happy marriage. We've got a young woman gazing out of the window at the party that she'd much rather be joining in with, and a rather glum looking man, both obviously very wealthy. It's a marriage of convenience, and the bird in the little gilded cage up here just sort of adds to that feeling that both of them are completely trapped by the wealth that they have and have foregone their happiness. And it's a real commentary on women being objects in Victorian society. However, this small part of the painting here, I believe, is probably painted from life in the Chelsea home that William and Evelyn de Morgan shared. So even though the subject matter is miles away from the marriage, the unusual marriage of equality that the two of them shared, I think that painting might have that small biographical detail. Certainly the tiny little lustre pot there at the top of the painting is in the De Morgan Foundation's collection. That's shown off next to these wonderful pieces of ceramic by William de Morgan, and we're able to talk about de Morgan's practice as a sort of an equal employer. So the fact he always employed women right from the start of De Morgan and Co, and the fact that he was interested in doing things like paying sick pay 8 years before that became statutory in this country. So someone who really had the best interests of others at heart, and that's a shared value that de Morgans have. This is my favourite view in the exhibition. It was a real thing to install and to get that looking so fantastic. What we wanted to do is for the shape of the ceramics to mirror the shape of the figures in Evelyn de Morgan's painting behind. So again, having these visual and aesthetic links between the two artists, however subtle and maybe unspotted by others that would be. But we have de Morgan's brilliant Persian ware in these beautiful blues through Bedford Park tiles, which were made by him in the 1870s for the architect Richard Norman Shaw for his Bedford Park development near Chiswick in London, compared to some ceramics from his later parts of his career at Merton Abbey and at Fulham. And you can see the beautiful shape there is mirrored by the figures in the Cadence of Autumn by Evelyn de Morgan, painting which depicts young women as the seasons of the year, as you know, to represent the passing of time. So in both of these pieces, we see the artists' plural allegiance to the aesthetic movement, a movement that believed that art should be for art's sake, that it should be beautiful rather than have a particular message in it. And I think to so lavishly illustrate the passing of time kind of gets to the de Morgan's sort of involvement in that movement, as it really is a painting that one can just enjoy. And the same with these beautiful ceramics at the front here. We're also able to talk about Persian ware, what that meant to the Victorians and how that term might be problematic today. And we've unpicked some of the specific motifs in de Morgan's pottery and design so that we can better attribute it to the geographic location it came from. And also we talk about Islamic art more widely, as really that's what the Victorians meant by Persian. It was art from the Islamic world that uses floral elements, calligraphy, and animal features and these geometric forms in order to represent the infinite nature of Allah. So that was a really lovely display cabinet for us to put together. And like I said, having the ceramics directly in front of that painting, I think is just a beautiful view in the exhibition. The de Morgans were very closely aligned in their belief system, and spiritualism was absolutely at the core of that. William was raised in a spiritualist household. His mother was a spiritual medium, and Evelyn de Morgan came to this a little bit later, probably through her meeting with William. They both believed in the eternity of the human soul. So even after the death of the body, they thought that would emancipate or release in some way the human soul. And we have two paintings here by Evelyn de Morgan depicting women trapped in prisons, a metaphor for the human soul trapped inside the body. It was interesting to be able to put William's peacock dish so close to The Prisoner by Evelyn de Morgan. As you can see, the peacock feather on the sleeve of this very kind of Renaissance inspired figure, which is wonderful because we start to understand them for the first time. De Morgan wasn't just using peacocks because he thought they were nice or because of their links to the aesthetic movement, but maybe he was using them because of their symbolic affiliation with immortality. And I think it has been interesting for me to pick out some of the symbols that de Morgan was using in his plates and think a bit more about why he was doing that rather than just seeing them as decorative, as I think other academics and curators have tended to do in the past. The Delaware Art Museum has two paintings which depict Jane Morris by Dante Gabriel Rossetti, one, the Water Willow from the 1870s, and Mnemosyne, the humanized form of memory, another brilliant painting by Rossetti, which is at Delaware Art Museum. But both of them depict her as being very young, very beautiful. And we all know, of course, about the supposed affair between Jane Morris and Dante Gabriel Rossetti in the 1870s. If we fast forward 30 years to 1904, Evelyn de Morgan actually took a trip to Kelmscott Manor to draw from life Jane Morris. And here she is in her old age with her signature hair looking stunning in silvery grey. And this is actually sort of a real coming together of these two artists, these two strong female characters from the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. Jane Morris coming out of retirement as a model to sit for a painting by Evelyn de Morgan, which really shows time, shown by the hourglass here, destroying beauty. So they were saying the art of the past, this very lavish pre-Raphaelite style painting, perhaps should be out of fashion, and maybe it should be the women and their personality that should be the focus of the future. And Jane and Evelyn were both members of the Women's Guild of Arts, which was established in 1907, in direct reaction to the Art Workers Guild not allowing women to join at that time. So it's a really strong series in this exhibition, which allows us to dig out some of the biographical features of the De Morgans and talk a little bit about some of their circle, particularly with that being at Delaware, when Delaware has such a strong collection of archival material and these works by Jane White. It's been really lovely to celebrate those links. We also have these 3 preparatory studies on the wall next between the painting and the portrait, as you can see, which show off De Morgan's working process. So I'd said that looking at her technique was really central to this exhibition. And as we have the nude study, drape study, and full compositional sort of study organisation in that drawing, they do look really lovely together. I have a very busy corner of the exhibition here to celebrate William De Morgan, and he's presented to you as an inventor and innovator. The material on loan from the Mark Samuels Lasner collection in the at Delaware, in the case at the front there, has a number of books which were in part designed by William, all written by his sister Mary De Morgan. And then we have some letters as well. For me, an astonishing discovery whilst putting this exhibition together was a letter in this collection from 1858, when William was just 9 years old, to an American publisher who he had sent the first copy of his novel Joseph Vance to. Now, until 2 weeks ago when I saw that letter, I had thought that literature was something De Morgan came to much later, after the closure of his ceramics business in 1906, when Joseph Vance was published. So for me to understand that he'd actually drafted a first copy of that book as a teenager, when he was at the same time he was practicing his art and wanting to become an artist, really shows that there was a lot more to him, and that his career isn't quite as linear as we had previously thought. So that's been a wonderful thing to put on display alongside his drawings for stained glass, for the ceramics, and a selection of his tiles, which just look beautiful in these custom built mounted wool display cases, which we saw the 3 plates in at the start as well. So it's a beautiful way of displaying things by Delaware Art Museum. And there's a close-up. So thanks to Rick for his wonderful work on bending these individual high security tags that hold the tiles in place in the show. We were also able to talk about materialism and the De Morgan's response to that. We know that both artists, as early as the 1850s for De Morgan, 1870s for Evelyn De Morgan, were reading John Ruskin, and they were quite interested in his socialism and materialism, particularly in the way that they thought people's material greed would stand in the way of their spiritual progress, or the happiness and the enjoyment of life of other people. So they were very interested in this kind of bigger picture thinking. Here we have Earthbound by Evelyn De Morgan, with a miser collecting his coins rather than watching his spirit fly away. And we have that same composition in this wonderful gold pigment on dark wove paper that Evelyn De Morgan was particularly well known for doing. Only her and Burne-Jones worked in this manner with the gold on the dark paper. So quite a special piece to be able to display in Delaware. And then, of course, we talk about the De Morgan's response to the First World War, a huge impact on both of the artists at the end of their lives, as Evelyn died in 1919, William a bit earlier in 1917. And we've been able to show the Red Cross, which is one of the pictures Evelyn De Morgan included in her 1916 exhibition, which was a fundraiser for the British Red Cross and Italian Cross Rosa. So it shows that their charitable engagement went a lot further than just having ideas and painting the pictures. Evelyn in particular was very charitably minded and left money in her will to various different charities as well. So that's really, I think, at the moment, and the way that the world is, and all the various things that are going on and struggles that people have, it's been lovely to celebrate these artists as being sort of their socialism and their their social and political ideals. And finally, before we leave the exhibition space and before I end this talk, we talk about the Renaissance revival, and it's a fantastic sort of full circle back to Flora and the wonderful lusterware bowl that we showed at the beginning of the exhibition. And it talks about the influence of Renaissance Italian art on both of the artists. We're also able to say that this continued throughout both of their lives, as they spent 6 months of each year living in Florence from 1890 to 1914, and were a big part of the artistic community in Florence and Italy, as well as back in the UK. And it's, you know, like I said, a lovely kind of full circle way of presenting their artworks from those early pieces through all their political ideals and right round to showing off these three wonderful drawings made by Evelyn de Morgan before the show finishes. Thank you so much, everybody. It's been wonderful to tell you about the De Morgan exhibition at Delaware Art Museum, not just in terms of what's on display and what the themes in the exhibition are, but telling you how we actually manage to do these things practically. It's a huge amount of work and a huge undertaking that usually happens behind the scenes, but I hope you've enjoyed, on this occasion, at least having a little bit of that shared with you. So thank you very much.